The rain was coming down in sheets, turning the highway into a mirror of red brake lights and blurred headlights. Marcus Thompson was already running late for his shift at the warehouse, his old Honda Civic struggling against the wind as he navigated the storm. He'd worked double shifts all week, saving every penny for his mother's medical bills, and the last thing he needed was to lose this job because of weather. That's when he saw it. A Mercedes-Benz S-Class, hazard lights blinking helplessly on the shoulder of I-95. The silver luxury sedan looked almost surreal in the downpour, like a fallen star on the edge of the highway. An older white man in an expensive suit stood beside it, cell phone pressed to his ear, gesturing frantically as rain soaked through his tailored jacket. Marcus's first instinct was to keep driving. He was already 20 minutes late. His supervisor had warned him about tardiness just last week, and helping strangers on dark highways wasn't exactly the safest choice for a young black man. But as he passed, something made him glance in the rearview mirror. The man had given up on his phone call and was now staring at his flat tire, shoulders slumped in defeat. Marcus knew that look. He'd worn it himself more times than he could count. When his own car broke down, when the bills piled up, when life seemed determined to kick you while you were down. Before he could talk himself out of it, he was pulling onto the shoulder, his hazards joining the Mercedes's desperate blinking. The older man looked up as Marcus's headlights illuminated him, squinting through the rain. There was a moment of hesitation, a flicker of something, surprise, concern, fear, crossing his face as Marcus stepped out of his car. "Need some help?" Marcus called out, raising his voice above the storm. He kept his hands visible, his movements deliberate and non-threatening. It was a dance he'd learned to perform without thinking, the careful choreography of being a young black man approaching a stranger in the dark. The man's expression shifted from wariness to relief. "Thank God," he said, his voice carrying the refined accent of old money. "I've been trying to call roadside assistance for 20 minutes, but the storm must be affecting the signal. I don't suppose you know anything about changing tires?" Marcus almost laughed. He'd been changing tires since he was 12, helping his uncle at the auto shop on weekends. "I might know a thing or two," he said, already moving to the trunk of the Mercedes. "You got a spare?" "I believe so," the man said uncertainly, "though I'll admit I've never actually had to use it." Marcus popped the trunk and found the spare tire, jack, and tools exactly where they should be, pristine and obviously never touched. He grabbed what he needed, noting how the man stepped back to give him space, still clutching his useless phone like a lifeline. "I'm Richard Whitmore, by the way," the man offered as Marcus knelt beside the flat tire. "And I can't tell you how grateful I am. I have a board meeting in an hour, and if I miss it—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "Marcus," he replied simply, already loosening the lug nuts. The rain was relentless, soaking through his work uniform in seconds, but he'd worked in worse conditions. "Board meeting on a night like this?" "Emergency session," Richard explained, hovering nearby like he wanted to help but had no idea how. "We're voting on a major acquisition. If I'm not there, it could cost my company millions." Marcus nodded, focusing on the task at hand. He'd learned long ago that rich people's problems were on a different scale, millions instead of hundreds, board meetings instead of double shifts. But a flat tire was a flat tire, and in this moment they were just two men on the side of a highway in the rain. As he worked, Richard tried to make conversation. "So, Marcus, what do you do?" "Warehouse work," Marcus replied, grunting as he positioned the jack. "Night shift at Patterson Logistics." "Patterson?" Richard's voice sharpened with interest. "That's one of our subsidiaries." "Which facility?" Marcus paused, glancing up. "The one on Industrial Boulevard." "Wait, what do you mean, our subsidiaries?" Richard looked almost embarrassed. "I'm the CEO of Whitmore Industries. We acquired Patterson Logistics about 3 years ago." Marcus's hands stilled for a moment. He was kneeling in the rain, changing a tire for the man who ultimately signed his paychecks. The irony wasn't lost on him. "Small world," he muttered, returning to his work. "Indeed," Richard agreed. Then more quietly, "How is it there? At the warehouse?" Marcus considered lying, giving the safe answer that any employee would give to the big boss. But something about the situation, the rain, the darkness, the strange intimacy of helping a stranger, made him honest. "It's tough," he admitted, lifting the flat tire off. "Management's always pushing for faster turnaround, but they won't hire enough people. We're doing the work of 2 shifts with 1 crew, and the equipment—" He shook his head. "Half the forklifts need maintenance, but they keep putting it off." Richard was quiet for a long moment. "I see," he finally said, and there was something in his tone that made Marcus look up. The older man was staring into the rain, his expression troubled. "Look, I didn't mean to complain," Marcus said quickly, suddenly aware that he might have just talked himself out of a job. "It's good work, steady pay. I'm grateful for it." No. Richard waved his hand dismissively. "I asked for honesty and you gave it. That's refreshing, actually." He watched as Marcus maneuvered the spare tire into place. "You know, most of my executives tell me everything's running perfectly. Efficiency up, costs down, profits soaring." "Maybe at headquarters," Marcus said, tightening the lug nuts. "But on the floor, different story." Richard nodded slowly, and something seemed to shift in his demeanor. He pulled out his phone again, this time managing to get a signal, and made a quick call. Marcus caught fragments. "Reschedule. Emergency. Tomorrow morning." "You're missing your meeting," Marcus observed as he lowered the car back down. "Some things are more important," Richard replied cryptically. He watched Marcus give the lug nuts a final check. "You're very skilled at this. Where did you learn?" "My uncle's shop," Marcus said, gathering the tools. "Spent every summer there growing up. He wanted me to take over the business, but—" He shrugged. "College didn't work out, and the shop barely breaks even these days." "Why didn't college work out?" Richard asked, and there was genuine curiosity in his voice, not judgment. Marcus hesitated. This wasn't a conversation he usually had with strangers, especially not wealthy white strangers. But again, something about the moment felt different. "Money mostly," he said finally. "I had a partial scholarship, but when my mom got sick, medical bills don't care about your dreams, you know?" Richard was quiet again, and Marcus wondered if he'd shared too much. He finished packing the tools back into the Mercedes's trunk, the flat tire beside them. "All done," he announced, stepping back. "You'll want to get that tire repaired or replaced soon. Spare's not meant for long distances." Richard reached for his wallet. "What do I owe you?" Marcus shook his head immediately. "Nothing, just helping out." "Nonsense," Richard insisted, pulling out several $100 bills. "You've saved me from a disaster, please." "Really, it's fine," Marcus said firmly. "Just glad I could help." Richard studied him for a long moment, then slowly returned the money to his wallet. "At least let me give you my card," he said, producing a business card from his jacket pocket. Even soaked with rain, it was clearly expensive stock. Marcus accepted it reluctantly, glancing at the embossed lettering, "Richard Whitmore, CEO, Whitmore Industries." Below it, a personal cell number. "If you ever need anything," Richard said meaningfully. "Anything at all." Marcus nodded, pocketing the card more out of politeness than any intention of using it. "Thanks. Drive safe in this weather." He was turning back to his own car when Richard called out, "Marcus?" He paused, looking back. "Which shift do you work?" "Night shift, 8 to 4. Richard nodded slowly. "I see. Well, thank you again. You've given me a lot to think about." Marcus didn't know what to make of that, so he just nodded and hurried back to his Civic. As he pulled back onto the highway, he glanced in his rearview mirror one last time. Richard Whitmore was still standing by his Mercedes, watching Marcus's taillights disappear into the storm. By the time Marcus reached the warehouse, he was 45 minutes late. His supervisor, Jerry, was waiting by the time clock, arms crossed and face set in a scowl that promised trouble. Marcus braced himself for the confrontation, his wet clothes clinging uncomfortably as he approached. But he never made it to the time clock. Because standing next to Jerry, looking equally grim, was someone Marcus had never expected to see at the warehouse. Someone whose presence would change everything. The night was about to take another unexpected turn, and Marcus Thompson's life would never be the same. The woman standing next to Jerry wore a sharp navy suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her expression could have frozen water. Marcus recognized her immediately from the employee orientation video. Victoria Chambers, Vice President of Operations for Whitmore Industries. What was corporate brass doing on the warehouse floor at 9 o'clock on a stormy Tuesday night? "Thompson," Jerry barked as Marcus approached. "You're 45 minutes late. Again." "I can explain," Marcus began, but Jerry cut him off. "Save it. This is the third time this month. You know the policy." Jerry's voice carried that particular satisfaction of a man who enjoyed wielding what little power he had. "Ms. Chambers here is conducting a facility review. Perfect timing for her to see exactly the kind of discipline problems we deal with." Victoria Chambers stepped forward, her heels clicking against the concrete floor. "Mr. Thompson, is it?" Her voice was crisp, professional, and utterly devoid of warmth. "Can you explain why you've been consistently late?" Marcus felt his wet uniform clinging to his skin, aware of how he must look, soaked, disheveled, and probably smelling like motor oil and rain. He thought about the business card in his pocket, about Richard Whitmore standing in the rain, but what good would that do? Who would believe that the CEO had been stranded on the highway? "I stopped to help someone with a flat tire," he said simply. "The storm made it take longer than expected." Jerry snorted. "Right. And I suppose this Good Samaritan will vouch for you?" "Actually," Victoria interjected, her phone buzzing. She glanced at the screen, and something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe confusion. "Excuse me for a moment." She stepped away, pressing the phone to her ear. Marcus caught fragments of her side of the conversation. "Yes, sir. Tonight." "I understand, of course, immediately." When she returned, her entire demeanor had changed. The Ice Queen efficiency had melted into something closer to bewilderment. "Mr. Thompson," she said slowly, "would you happen to know anything about a flat tire on I-95 about an hour ago?" Jerry's face went slack. "Wait, what?" "I just received a call from Mr. Whitmore himself," Victoria continued, her eyes fixed on Marcus. "He's ordering an immediate halt to all disciplinary actions against any employee who was late tonight due to the storm. He also mentioned something about a Good Samaritan who helped him with a flat tire." She paused. "He described someone who sounds remarkably like you." Marcus felt the weight of every eye in the warehouse suddenly on him. The other workers who had been pretending not to eavesdrop were now openly staring. Jerry's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "You helped the CEO change a tire?" Jerry finally managed, his voice strangled. "I didn't know who he was at first," Marcus said quietly. "Just saw someone who needed help." Victoria's phone buzzed again. She read the message, and this time there was no hiding her shock. "Mr. Whitmore is on his way here. Now. He says he wants to personally thank the employee who helped him tonight." The warehouse erupted in whispers. Jerry looked like he might faint. Marcus just stood there, dripping rainwater onto the concrete, wondering how a simple act of kindness had spiraled into this. But he has the board meeting, Victoria said, more to herself than anyone else. The acquisition vote. He rescheduled it, Marcus offered. I heard him on the phone. Victoria stared at him like he'd grown a second head. He rescheduled a $50 million acquisition vote to come to a warehouse. 20 minutes later, the silver Mercedes pulled into the employee parking lot. Richard Whitmore stepped out, now wearing a fresh suit, but still carrying himself with the same understated authority Marcus had noticed on the highway. He walked through the warehouse doors like he belonged there, though Marcus suspected this was the first time the CEO had ever set foot in one of his distribution centers. "Marcus!" Richard's face lit up when he spotted him. He strode forward, hand extended, leaving Victoria and Jerry scrambling in his wake. "I realized I never properly thanked you." Marcus shook his hand, acutely aware of the surreal nature of the moment. "You really didn't have to come all the way here, Mr. Whitmore. Please, call me Richard." And yes, I did. He turned to address the growing crowd of workers who had stopped pretending to work. This young man stopped in a dangerous storm to help a complete stranger. He could have driven past, probably should have given the conditions, but he didn't. And when I offered to pay him, he refused. Richard's eyes swept the warehouse. "That's the kind of character I want in this company." Jerry cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, about the tardiness." "What tardiness?" Richard's voice cooled considerably. "I see an employee who prioritized human decency over punctuality. If that's a problem here, then we have bigger issues to discuss." The threat in his tone was unmistakable. Jerry seemed to shrink several inches. Richard turned back to Marcus. "I understand you've been working nights here?" "Yes, sir. About 8 months now." "And before that?" "Different warehouses, some construction, whatever paid the bills." Richard nodded thoughtfully. "You mentioned your uncle's auto shop. What happened with that?" Marcus glanced around at his co-workers, uncomfortable with being the center of attention. "It's still running, barely. He can't afford to hire help, and I can't afford to work for what he can pay." "I see." Richard was quiet for a moment then. "Victoria, what's our policy on education assistance?" Victoria straightened. "We offer tuition reimbursement for job-related courses up to $5,000 per year." "That's not enough," Richard said flatly. "Not nearly enough." He looked at Marcus. "You mentioned college didn't work out because of financial constraints. What were you studying?" "Business administration," Marcus replied, then added quietly, "I wanted to learn how to run a shop properly, maybe expand my uncle's business someday." Richard smiled slightly. "Good. Practical." He turned to Victoria. "I want a full scholarship program implemented, not just tuition, but books, living expenses, the works, for employees who demonstrate exceptional character and potential." Victoria's eyes widened. "Sir, that would require board approval, and the cost." "Then get it on the next board agenda," Richard interrupted. "As for the cost, consider it an investment in human capital." He glanced around the warehouse again, his expression hardening as he took in the conditions Marcus had mentioned. The aging equipment, the understaffed shifts, the workers who looked exhausted even at the beginning of their shift. "Also," he continued, "I want a full operational review of all our warehouse facilities. Not the sanitized reports I usually get, but real assessments from the people who actually work here." He gestured to Marcus. "Starting with this young man's insights about equipment maintenance and staffing levels." Jerry had gone pale. "Mr. Whitmore, I assure you we run a tight ship here." "Do you?" Richard's voice was silk over steel. "Because from what I'm hearing, we're running our people into the ground and calling it efficiency." He turned to address the assembled workers. "I built this company on the principle that if you take care of your people, they'll take care of the business. Somewhere along the way, it seems we've forgotten that. He pulled out his phone and made a quick call. Sarah, I need you to clear my calendar for tomorrow. I'll be spending the day at the Patterson Logistics facility. Yes, all day. No, this can't wait. Hanging up, he turned back to Marcus. I'd like you to show me around tomorrow. Give me the real tour, not the executive version. Same pay as your regular shift, of course, plus overtime. Sure, Marcus managed, still trying to process everything that was happening. Good. Richard clapped him on the shoulder. Oh, and Marcus, that position at your uncle's shop, what would it take to make it viable for both of you? Marcus blinked. I'm not sure I understand. I'm thinking about diversifying our services, Richard explained. We ship auto parts all over the country, but we don't have any direct connection to the repair industry. Maybe it's time we did. A partnership with independent shops, perhaps, training programs, equipment leasing. He smiled. But I'd need someone who understands both sides of the business to help develop that program. The warehouse had gone completely silent. Even the constant hum of machinery seemed to have paused, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Mr. Whitmore, Victoria interrupted carefully, are you offering Mr. Thompson a corporate position? I'm offering him an opportunity, Richard corrected. If he wants it. He'll need to finish his degree first, of course. But I think we could work something out. Part-time hours here, internship at corporate, whatever works with his schedule. He looked at Marcus. What do you think? Marcus's mind was spinning. An hour ago, he'd been worried about losing his warehouse job. Now the CEO was talking about corporate positions and business partnerships. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it, Richard suggested. This is a lot to process, I know. But Marcus, what you did tonight, it wasn't just about changing a tire, it was about seeing someone who needed help and acting without calculation or expectation of reward. That's rare. He paused. You mentioned your mother's medical bills. Are they ongoing? Marcus's throat tightened. She's in remission now, but the debt, it'll take years to pay off. Richard nodded. We'll discuss that tomorrow, too. Our employee assistance program might be able to help. He checked his watch. I should go. But Marcus, keep that card I gave you. My direct line is on there. Use it. As Richard turned to leave, he paused at the door, looking back at the assembled workers. By the way, effective immediately, anyone working tonight gets hazard pay for the weather conditions. And Jerry? The supervisor straightened nervously. I want a report on equipment maintenance needs on my desk by Friday, a real one. After Richard left, the warehouse exploded in conversation. Workers crowded around Marcus, peppering him with questions. Jerry retreated to his office, looking like a man who'd just seen his career flash before his eyes. Victoria lingered, studying Marcus with new interest. You really didn't know who he was? She asked quietly. Marcus shook his head. Just saw someone who needed help. She smiled slightly. Well, Mr. Thompson, I think you just changed the course of your life, and possibly this entire facility's. As Marcus finally clocked in, no longer worried about being late, he thought about the strange twists fate could take. This morning he'd been worried about making rent. Tonight he was being offered opportunities he'd never dreamed possible, all because he'd stopped to help a stranger in the rain. But the real changes were just beginning, because Richard Whitmore was a man of his word, and what happened next would ripple far beyond one warehouse, one worker, or one act of kindness. It would challenge everything Marcus thought he knew about success, opportunity, and the power of human connection. The storm outside had finally passed, but inside the warehouse, a different kind of change was brewing, one that would transform not just Marcus's life, but the lives of hundreds of workers across the company, and it all started with a flat tire on a rainy night. The morning sun struggled through the warehouse skylights as Marcus arrived 2 hours early for his shift. He couldn't sleep anyway, his mind racing with everything that had happened. The parking lot was nearly empty, just the security guard's sedan and a few cars belonging to the morning maintenance crew. He'd worn his cleanest work uniform, even ironed it, though he felt slightly ridiculous doing so. At exactly 8 a.m., the silver Mercedes pulled into the lot. But Richard Whitmore wasn't alone. 3 other cars followed, 2 black SUVs and a sleek Tesla. Out stepped what looked like half of corporate. Suits and skirts, tablets and portfolios, faces Marcus recognized from the company website but had never seen in person. Victoria Chambers emerged from the Tesla, looking considerably less composed than the night before. She speed-walked to Richard's car, leaning in to speak with him through the window. Whatever he said made her shoulders slump slightly before she straightened, pasting on a professional smile. Richard stepped out wearing khakis and a polo shirt. Still expensive, but dramatically dressed down from his usual attire. He spotted Marcus and smiled, waving off the encroaching executives. "Marcus, right on time." He approached with an extended hand. "I hope you don't mind. Word got out about my visit, and suddenly everyone wanted to tag along." "It's your company," Marcus said, shaking his hand. "True, but this was supposed to be about getting an honest look at operations." Richard glanced back at his entourage. "Hard to do that with the circus in town." He raised his voice slightly. "Victoria, why don't you take everyone to the conference room? I'll join you in an hour." Victoria's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. "Sir, we have the regional managers on video conference at 9 and the safety inspection team is already here." "They can wait," Richard said firmly. "Or better yet, they can start their inspection without me. I'm sure they'll find everything in perfect order." The slight sarcasm in his tone wasn't lost on anyone. After some shuffling and murmured protest, the corporate group filed into the building, leaving Richard and Marcus standing in the morning sun. "Sorry about that," Richard said. "Apparently a CEO can't go anywhere without an entourage." "You're really going to spend your morning getting a tour from a warehouse worker?" Marcus asked, still not quite believing this was happening. "I built this company from nothing," Richard replied, starting to walk toward the warehouse entrance. "Started in a garage, actually. Somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing what was really happening on the ground. Last night was a wake-up call." They entered through the employee entrance, not the visitor's door. Richard insisted on clocking in as a visitor at the regular time clock, chuckling at the security guard's double take. "So," Richard said as they walked down the main aisle, "show me what I've been missing." Marcus started with the obvious, the loading docks where half the bay doors stuck, requiring workers to manually force them open. The break room with its single microwave for 50 workers. The coffee machine that had been temporarily out of order for 3 months. The bathroom where only 2 of 5 stalls had functioning locks. But it was the equipment area that really caught Richard's attention. 3 forklifts sat idle, tagged with maintenance requests dating back weeks. Another had a makeshift repair involving duct tape and wire. "We've been reporting these issues for months," Marcus explained, pointing to the maintenance log. "Jerry keeps saying parts are on order, but nothing ever arrives." Richard pulled out his phone, taking photos. "And workers are expected to use unsafe equipment?" "Or work twice as hard without it," Marcus confirmed. "Last week, Danny threw out his back-moving pallets by hand because all the lifts were down." They moved to the inventory section, where Marcus showed him the outdated scanning system that crashed regularly, forcing workers to log everything manually. The computer terminals that still ran Windows XP. The scheduling board where shifts were still assigned with magnetic tags like something from the 1980s. "The corporate newsletters talk about our state-of-the-art logistics systems," Marcus said, unable to keep a hint of bitterness from his voice. "Corporate newsletters are written by people who've never worked a warehouse floor," Richard muttered, typing notes into his phone. "What about safety equipment?" Marcus led him to a storage closet where safety harnesses hung with frayed straps, hard hats with expiration dates from 2 years ago, and a first aid kit that contained mostly empty bandage boxes. "We keep requesting replacements," Marcus said. "The response is always that budget's tight, numbers are down, we need to make do. Meanwhile, we just spent $2 million renovating the executive offices," Richard said quietly, more to himself than Marcus. "Marble countertops in the bathrooms." They continued the tour, Marcus growing more comfortable as Richard asked increasingly detailed questions. Workers they passed shot curious glances their way. Word had spread quickly about who was getting the tour and why. In the shipping department, they encountered Maria Gonzalez, who had worked there for 15 years. She was struggling with a pallet jack that kept veering left. "Mrs. Gonzalez," Marcus said, "this is Mr. Whitmore. He's looking at our equipment issues." Maria's eyes widened, but she recovered quickly. "About time someone did. This thing nearly took out my ankle yesterday." "When did you report it?" Richard asked. 6 weeks ago, and 3 weeks ago, and last Tuesday." She pulled out her phone, showing him photos of the maintenance request forms. "I keep copies because they have a habit of disappearing." Richard's expression darkened. "May I?" He took the pallet jack handle, testing it himself. The equipment pulled hard to the left, requiring constant correction. "This is dangerous." "Tell that to Jerry," Maria muttered, then looked horrified at her own boldness. "No, please, speak freely," Richard encouraged. "This is exactly what I need to hear." Maria glanced at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. "Look, Mr. Whitmore, we're not asking for luxury, just equipment that works and doesn't put us in the hospital. My husband works construction. Even his company treats tools better than this." Over the next hour, more workers approached them, emboldened by Richard's genuine interest. They shared stories of denied overtime pay, schedules changed without notice, safety concerns dismissed. Richard listened to everything, taking notes, asking questions. They were examining the loading dock when Victoria appeared, looking stressed. "Sir, the regional managers are getting restless, and Jerry's asking when he can join the tour." "Jerry's not joining anything," Richard said flatly. "Tell the regional managers we're restructuring the meeting. I want each of them to spend 4 hours working a regular warehouse shift today, full duties, no special treatment." Victoria's mouth opened slightly. "Sir, they're not dressed for—" "Then find them appropriate clothing. Company store should have uniforms." Richard turned back to Marcus. "Show me the time card system. I want to understand how your hours are tracked." The time card area revealed another issue. An ancient system that frequently lost clock-in times, always in the company's favor. Marcus showed him printouts workers kept of their actual hours versus what appeared on paychecks. "We lose 2-3 hours a week sometimes," Marcus explained. "HR says it's system glitches, promises to fix it next pay period. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't." Richard's face was granite now. This isn't incompetence. This is wage theft. They encountered Jerry near the supervisor's office, the man's face cycling through various shades of red as he saw them approaching. "Mr. Whitmore, I was just coming to find you. I've prepared a presentation on our efficiency metrics." "I'm not interested in presentations." Richard cut him off. "I'm interested in why you have maintenance requests dating back months, safety equipment past expiration, and workers reporting lost wages." Jerry's smile faltered. "Well, sir, you have to understand we're dealing with budget constraints. The same constraints that let you approve new furniture for your office last month." Richard held up his phone, showing a photo of Jerry's leather chair and mahogany desk, visible through his office window. "Interesting priorities. Sir, I can explain. Not to me, to them." Richard gestured to the workers who had gathered, drawn by the confrontation. Explain to the people who work themselves sick why their safety matters less than your comfort. Jerry's mouth opened and closed, but no words came. Richard turned to Victoria. I want a full audit, equipment, time cards, maintenance requests, everything. External auditors, not internal. And until that's complete, Jerry's suspended. With pay, for now. The warehouse had gone silent, workers frozen in disbelief. Marcus felt like he was watching a movie, except he was somehow in it. Marcus will serve as interim supervisor, Richard continued. He clearly knows more about this operation than the person currently running it. But sir, Victoria protested, he doesn't have management experience. He has something better, integrity. Richard looked around at the assembled workers. Effective immediately, all safety concerns stop at my desk until they're resolved. Anonymous reporting system, no retaliation. And those time clock glitches end today or I start firing IT staff. He turned to address the growing crowd. I owe all of you an apology. I built this company on the idea that workers deserve respect and fair treatment. Somewhere along the way, I let middle management turn into exactly what I fought against when I was starting out. That changes now. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Hope mixed with skepticism. They'd heard corporate promises before. I know words are cheap, Richard continued, as if reading their minds. So here's action. Effective immediately, hourly wages increase by $3 across the board. Full benefits kick in after 30 days, not 90. And we're implementing a profit-sharing program. When the company does well, so do you. The murmur became a buzz. Someone in the back started clapping, and soon the whole warehouse erupted in applause. Marcus saw tears in Maria's eyes, saw Danny, who'd hurt his back, grinning despite his obvious pain. But Richard wasn't finished. One more thing. Marcus mentioned medical debts last night. How many of you are struggling with medical bills, even with our current insurance? About a third of the hands went up, some hesitantly. We're establishing a medical debt relief fund. 0 interest loans, payment plans based on what you can actually afford. No one who works for this company should have to choose between their health and their bills. The applause became thunderous. Workers who'd never spoken to each other were hugging. Jerry slunk away toward his office, ignored by everyone. Marcus, Richard said quietly, under the noise, I'm serious about that interim position. You showed me what I needed to see. Help me fix it. I don't know anything about being a supervisor, Marcus protested. You know what's wrong and what needs to be right. That's more than Jerry ever figured out. Richard smiled. Besides, it's temporary. Once you finish your degree, we'll talk about that corporate position. As the celebration continued around them, Richard's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and chuckled. Board's having an emergency meeting. Apparently, someone leaked that I'm giving away the store. He typed a quick response. I just told them to check our last quarter's profits. We can afford to treat people decently. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. Regional managers arrived in their suits and were promptly handed warehouse uniforms. Richard insisted they work alongside regular employees, and Marcus had the surreal experience of watching a VP struggle with the same faulty pallet Jack Maria had been using. By lunch, the entire dynamic of the warehouse had shifted. Workers moved with new purpose, talking openly about problems they'd kept quiet for years. The maintenance team, given direct access to Richard's emergency fund authorization, swarmed over broken equipment. Richard set up a temporary office in the break room where workers could speak with him directly. The line stretched down the hallway. As Marcus helped coordinate the controlled chaos, he kept thinking about that moment on the highway. One simple decision, to stop and help, had triggered an avalanche of change, not just for him, but for hundreds of people. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. Why is our insurance company calling about debt forgiveness? What did you do? He smiled, typing back, "I changed a tire, Mom. Just changed a tire." But they both knew it was more than that. Sometimes the biggest transformations start with the smallest acts of kindness, and sometimes helping a stranger in the rain changes everything. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of changes, challenges, and unexpected revelations. Marcus found himself thrust into a role he'd never imagined, trying to navigate the complex world of warehouse management while still processing his own dramatic change in circumstances. His first day as interim supervisor started at 5 a.m., 2 hours before the morning shift. He sat in what used to be Jerry's office, now temporarily his, staring at a computer screen filled with spreadsheets he barely understood. The leather chair felt wrong, too soft, too expensive. He'd already moved the mahogany desk to storage, replacing it with a simple table from the break room. A knock on the door interrupted his struggle with the scheduling software. Maria Gonzalez stood in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need this," she said, setting one on his desk. "You're here early." "Trying to figure out next week's schedule," Marcus admitted, gesturing at the screen. "Jerry's system doesn't make any sense. Why is Johnson scheduled for receiving when he's certified for forklift operation?" Maria laughed, pulling up a chair. "Because Johnson dated Jerry's niece last year and it ended badly. Jerry's been giving him the worst assignments ever since." Marcus rubbed his temples. "Great. So I'm not just dealing with logistics, I'm untangling years of petty grudges." "Welcome to management," Maria said, not unkindly. She leaned forward, pointing at the screen. "Look, forget Jerry's system. Start fresh. You know who's good at what, who works well together. Schedule based on that." Over the next hour, Maria helped him rebuild the schedule from scratch. She'd been there 15 years, knew everyone's strengths, their family situations, who needed which shifts for childcare. By the time the morning crew arrived, they had a schedule that actually made sense. But the challenges were just beginning. As workers clocked in, Marcus noticed the divide. Some greeted him warmly, excited about the changes. Others avoided eye contact, clearly skeptical that anything would really improve. A few seemed openly resentful that he'd leapfrogged over people with more seniority. Tommy Briggs, a 20-year veteran, confronted him directly during the morning meeting. "No offense, Marcus, but what makes you qualified to run this place?" "Because you changed some rich guy's tire." The room went quiet. Marcus felt every eye on him, waiting to see how he'd handle the challenge. "You're right," Marcus said, surprising everyone. "I'm not qualified. Not in the traditional sense. I've never managed people, never done budgets, never dealt with corporate politics." He paused, meeting Tommy's gaze. "But I know what it's like to work a double shift because the schedule's a mess. I know how it feels when equipment breaks and nobody upstairs cares, and I know Mr. Whitmore is serious about fixing things because I watched him look at our reality and actually give a damn." Tommy crossed his arms, not convinced. "Words are cheap. We've heard promises before." "Fair enough," Marcus nodded. "So let's talk actions." The new forklifts arrive Monday. Payroll confirmed the raise hits this week's check. And see that suggestion box by the door? Every single item goes directly to Mr. Whitmore's desk. Not to me, not to corporate, straight to him. A murmur ran through the room. The suggestion box was Marcus's idea, implemented after Richard's visit. In 3 days, it had collected dozens of ideas, complaints, and observations. "I'm not here to be your boss," Marcus continued. "I'm here to be your advocate. You don't like how I'm doing something? Tell me. Think someone else should have this job? Put it in the box. But while I'm here, I'm going to fight for every single person in this warehouse." After the meeting, Tommy lingered behind. "My kid's got asthma," he said quietly. "That medical debt relief program, is that real?" Filed your paperwork myself yesterday, Marcus replied. Should hear back within a week. Tommy nodded slowly, then extended his hand. Maybe you'll do okay, kid. But not everyone was warming up. That afternoon, Marcus discovered that someone had accidentally deleted half the maintenance requests from the system. Then a shipment arrived 2 hours early, throwing the receiving department into chaos. Small things, but enough to make everything harder. Victoria Chambers appeared during the shipment crisis, her heels clicking against the warehouse floor as she surveyed the controlled chaos. "Mr. Thompson, a word?" In his office, she closed the door with deliberate care. "You're being tested," she said without preamble. "Not just by the workers. Middle management across the company is watching. Some of them think Richard's lost his mind. Because he's treating workers fairly? Because he's disrupting the system," she corrected. "Jerry wasn't an exception. He was the norm. There are Jerrys in every facility, every department, and they're not happy about a warehouse worker's story inspiring the CEO to turn everything upside down." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "Are you warning me or threatening me?" A smile flickered across her face. "Warning. I've been with this company 12 years. I've seen initiatives come and go. But this feels different." She paused. "Richard called me at midnight last night. He spent 2 hours asking about our operations, our people, our values. He hasn't done that since the early days." "What changed?" "You did. Or rather, what you represented. He built this company on certain principles, then let it drift. You reminded him why he started." She straightened her blazer. "Just know that not everyone wants to be reminded." After she left, Marcus spent an hour reviewing safety reports. The new system was already bearing fruit. Workers were reporting issues they'd kept quiet about for years. A broken railing in shipping, exposed wiring in the back corridor, a ventilation problem in receiving that had been making people sick for months. His phone buzzed. "Richard, how's day 3 going?" Marcus typed back, "Surviving. Barely." "Good. Surviving means you're taking it seriously. Board meeting tomorrow at 2. Need you there." Marcus stared at the message. "Board meeting? I'm not qualified for that." "Neither am I most days. See you at 2. The next morning brought fresh challenges. A group of drivers arrived early, angry about route changes implemented before Marcus's time. He spent 2 hours mediating, eventually working out a compromise that satisfied most of them. Then came the accident. Marcus was in receiving when he heard the crash. A forklift had clipped a support beam, sending a stack of pallets tumbling. Steve Mitchell, the operator, jumped clear just in time, but boxes scattered everywhere. The old response would have been to blame Steve, write him up, maybe even fire him. Instead, Marcus grabbed a hard hat and joined the cleanup crew. "You okay?" he asked Steve, who was visibly shaken. "I'm sorry, I didn't see. The mirror's been broken for weeks. I put in a request, but..." "Stop." Marcus cut him off gently. "Are you hurt?" "No, but..." "Then we're good. Let's figure out how to prevent this next time." They discovered 3 more forklifts with broken mirrors, all with maintenance requests dating back to Jerry's tenure. Marcus called maintenance directly, invoking Richard's emergency authorization. Within an hour, a repair crew was on site. At 1:30, Marcus changed into the one dress shirt he owned and headed to corporate headquarters. The building was everything the warehouse wasn't. Gleaming glass, marble floors, abstract art that probably cost more than his annual salary. The boardroom took his breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. A massive table dominated the space, surrounded by leather chairs that probably cost more than his car. Richard sat at the head, gesturing for Marcus to join him. The other board members ranged from curious to openly skeptical. Marcus recognized some faces from corporate newsletters, titans of industry, venture capitalists, people whose decisions affected thousands of lives. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard began, "this is Marcus Thompson. 3 weeks ago, he changed my tire in a storm. Since then, he's helped me see what we've become and what we need to be." For the next hour, Richard presented his findings from the warehouse visits. The response was mixed. Some board members nodded thoughtfully, others looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Richard," said a silver-haired woman Marcus recognized as CFO Margaret Walsh, "while these humanitarian efforts are admirable, we have shareholders to consider. The proposed wage increases alone will impact our profit margins by 0.3%, Richard interrupted. "I've run the numbers. We made $1.2 billion in profit last quarter. We can afford to pay living wages." "It's not just about affordability," another board member interjected. "It's about precedent. If we raise wages at one facility, every location will expect the same." "Good," Richard said simply. "They should." The debate continued, growing heated. Marcus felt out of his depth until Richard turned to him. "Marcus, tell them about the forklift accident this morning." Marcus hesitated, then spoke. "A driver nearly got hurt because a broken mirror hadn't been fixed for weeks. The repair cost us $50. The workers' comp claim, if he'd been injured, thousands. Maybe hundreds of thousands if it was serious. Multiply that across every facility," Richard added. "We're not losing money by treating workers well. We're losing money by treating them poorly." Margaret Walsh leaned forward. "Mr. Thompson, you've been a supervisor for 3 days. What makes you think you understand the complexities of running a multi-billion-dollar corporation?" Marcus felt the weight of every eye in the room. These were people who could buy and sell his entire neighborhood without blinking. But he thought about Maria, about Tommy's kid with asthma, about Steve shaking after his near miss. "I don't understand all the complexities," he admitted. "But I understand this. Every number on your spreadsheets represents real people. People with families, with bills, with dreams. When you see them as numbers, you make decisions that hurt them. When you see them as people, you make decisions that help everyone, including the company." The room was silent. Then Richard smiled. "That's why he's here, to remind us what we've forgotten." The vote was closer than Richard hoped, 7-5 in favor of his proposed changes. But it passed. As board members filed out, several stopped to shake Marcus's hand. Margaret Walsh lingered last. "You speak well, Mr. Thompson," she said, studying him. "Richard tells me you're planning to finish your business degree?" "Yes, ma'am, part-time while working." She pulled out a business card. "Call me when you graduate. We need voices like yours in finance, not just operations." Back at the warehouse, the afternoon shift was buzzing with rumors about the board meeting. Marcus gathered everyone for an announcement. "The board approved the changes," he said simply. "All of them. Wages, benefits, equipment upgrades, the medical debt program. It's official." The cheer that went up rattled the skylights. Workers hugged. Some cried. Maria grabbed Marcus in a bear hug that nearly cracked his ribs. But as the celebration continued, Marcus noticed something else. Jerry's old office, his temporary office, had been decorated. Someone had hung a sign. "Marcus Thompson, warehouse advocate." A plant sat on his desk. Photos of the warehouse crew covered one wall. "We did that at lunch," Maria explained, seeing his expression. "This isn't temporary anymore, is it?" Marcus thought about the board meeting, about Richard's plans, about the scholarship that would let him finish his degree while working, about how one act of kindness had rippled into transformation for hundreds of people. "No," he said quietly, "I don't think it is." Later that evening, as the warehouse quieted and the night shift settled into routine, Marcus sat in his office looking at the photos on the wall. His phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "You did well today. This is just the beginning." Marcus smiled. thinking about flat tires and fate, about kindness and change. Sometimes the biggest journeys begin with the smallest steps, or in his case, with stopping to help a stranger in the rain. Outside, the warehouse hummed with new energy. Equipment that worked, people who felt valued, hope that felt real. All because one rainy night, Marcus Thompson had chosen to stop and help. The transformation was just beginning. The resistance began subtly, like water finding cracks in a foundation. Marcus first noticed it during a regional supervisor's video conference 3 weeks after the board meeting. Faces on the screen ranged from politely skeptical to openly hostile as he presented the Patterson facility's improved metrics, reduced workplace injuries, higher productivity, lower turnover. "Of course your numbers look good," sneered Bill Crawford, supervisor of the Riverside warehouse. "Corporate's pouring money into your facility like you're the golden child. What about the rest of us?" "The investment is available to all facilities," Marcus replied evenly. "Mr. Whitmore made that clear. You just have to submit the requests." "Submit requests to a kid who's been on the job for a month?" interrupted Sandra Martinez from the Eastside Distribution Center. "No offense, Marcus, but some of us have been doing this for decades. We don't need corporate's new pet project telling us how to run our operations." The meeting ended with forced pleasantries, but Marcus could feel the undercurrent of resentment. He wasn't just fighting inertia anymore. He was fighting active resistance. Later that afternoon, his mother called. His mother, "Baby, I just got the strangest call from someone claiming to be from corporate, asking all sorts of questions about you, personal stuff, your arrest record, your credit history." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. "I don't have an arrest record, Mom." "That's what I told them. But they kept pushing, asking about your father, about that time the police came to the house when you were 16. When the neighbor reported a break-in that turned out to be me forgetting my key," Marcus finished. "Mom, did they say who they were exactly?" "Just that they were from Human Resources doing a background check. But something felt off." After hanging up, Marcus called Victoria Chambers. She listened to his concern with increasing alarm. "That's not our HR department," she said firmly. "We completed all background checks before your interim appointment. Someone's digging for dirt." "Any idea who?" "I have suspicions, but no proof. Watch your back, Marcus. You're making waves, and not everyone wants to swim." The next morning brought more turbulence. A delivery truck from the Riverside warehouse arrived with damaged goods, entire pallets of electronics roughly handled, boxes crushed. The driver, a young guy named Pete, looked nervous as Marcus inspected the damage. "This isn't how we loaded it," Pete insisted. "Mr. Crawford had us reload everything just before I left, said it needed to be reorganized." Marcus documented everything with photos, his jaw tight. This wasn't negligence, it was sabotage. The damaged goods would reflect badly on his facility's receiving metrics, maybe even trigger an insurance investigation. He was still dealing with the aftermath when Richard called. "I hear you're having some challenges with the other facilities." "Word travels fast," Marcus muttered, explaining about the damaged shipment and the mysterious phone calls. "Unfortunately, this isn't surprising," Richard sighed. "I've been getting pushback from several regional managers. They're suggesting we're moving too fast, that you're too inexperienced, that we should reassess the whole initiative." "Are you reassessing?" "Not a chance. But Marcus, they're going to come at you harder now. Are you prepared for that?" Marcus looked out his office window at the warehouse floor. Workers moved with purpose, equipment hummed properly, and for the first time in years, people were smiling at their jobs. "I didn't ask for this fight, but I'm not backing down from it." "Good, because I have another request that's going to make things more interesting. There's a conference next week in Chicago, the National Logistics Leadership Summit. I want you to speak." "Speak? About what?" "About what we're doing here, the changes, the results, the philosophy behind it. Other companies need to hear this message. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Richard, I'm not a public speaker. I'm just a warehouse guy who changed a tire. You're a leader who saw what was wrong and helped fix it. That's exactly who needs to be speaking. The conference was 6 days away. Meanwhile, the resistance intensified. Emails from other facilities started getting lost. Routine inter-warehouse transfers became complicated. Marcus noticed his computer login was mysteriously slow, IT claiming system issues that only affected his account. Then came Thursday. Marcus arrived at 5 a.m. to find his office door ajar, papers scattered across his desk. Someone had been through his files. Nothing sensitive was kept there. He'd learned that lesson early. But the violation stung. Security footage showed a figure in maintenance coveralls entering his office at 2 a.m. The face was obscured, the uniform generic enough to be from any facility. But Marcus knew this wasn't random. That afternoon, he called a warehouse meeting. The entire staff gathered, sensing something serious. Someone broke into my office last night, he announced bluntly. They went through files, probably looking for something to use against me or this facility. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I want you all to know, I'm not going anywhere. The changes we're making, the progress we're seeing, it's threatening to people who profit from the old system. They want us to fail. They want things to go back to how they were. Tommy Briggs stepped forward. We've got your back, boss. Anyone tries to mess with you or this warehouse, they go through all of us. A chorus of agreement rose from the assembled workers. Marcus felt a lump in his throat. 6 weeks ago, some of these people had resented his promotion. Now they were family. That evening, Marcus met with his Uncle James at the old auto shop. The familiar smell of motor oil and tire rubber was comforting after the corporate battles. You look tired, nephew, James observed, handing him a wrench. They worked in companionable silence for a while, Marcus finding peace in the simple task of changing brake pads. Remember when you were 12 and those older kids tried to shake you down for your lunch money? James asked suddenly. You told me bullies feed on fear. Stand up to them once and they usually back down. Still true. These corporate bullies aren't much different. They're just wearing suits instead of stolen sneakers. James wiped his hands on a rag. You know, Richard Whitmore called me yesterday. Marcus nearly dropped the wrench. He what? Wanted to talk about that partnership idea, helping independent shops like mine connect with their supply chain. He's serious about it, Marcus. Says you inspired him to think differently about the business. I just mentioned your shop in passing. Boy, you've got to stop thinking so small. You changed that man's tire, but you also changed his perspective. Now he's changing a whole company. That's not small. The next morning, Marcus found an envelope on his desk. Inside was a printed email exchange between several regional managers, discussing strategies to contain the Patterson problem and minimize Thompson's influence. Someone had leaked it to him. He had allies he didn't even know about. He forwarded everything to Richard and Victoria, then focused on preparing for Chicago. If they wanted a fight, he'd give them one, but not on their terms. The night before the conference, Marcus sat in his apartment, surrounded by note cards and presentation slides. His phone buzzed with a text from Richard. Don't try to be someone you're not tomorrow. Be the guy who stopped to help a stranger. That's who needs to speak. The conference hall was intimidating. Hundreds of logistics professionals, corporate executives, industry leaders. Marcus's panel was titled Innovation in Workforce Management, sandwiched between presentations on AI automation and supply chain optimization. When his turn came, Marcus abandoned his prepared remarks. Instead, he told a story. 6 weeks ago, I changed a tire in the rain. The man I helped turned out to be the CEO of my company. But here's what matters. I didn't know who he was. I just saw someone who needed help. The room was silent, attentive. That moment led to changes at our warehouse. Not because I was special, but because someone in power finally saw what frontline workers experience every day: broken equipment, unsafe conditions, wages that don't cover basic needs, things that spreadsheets don't capture. He clicked through slides showing before and after metrics: injury rates down 60%, productivity up 35%, turnover at a historic low. These numbers aren't about new technology or complex systems. They're about treating people with dignity, fixing equipment when it breaks, paying living wages, listening to the people who actually do the work. He saw nods in the audience, especially from younger executives. The resistance we're facing isn't about money. Our improvements cost less than 1% of quarterly profits. It's about power, about who gets to decide what matters in a company. Questions came fast and challenging. Marcus answered honestly, admitting mistakes, sharing lessons learned. By the end, he had business cards pressed into his hands, invitations to speak at other conferences, even a few job offers. But the real victory came that evening. His phone exploded with messages from workers at other Whitmore facilities. The leaked email had spread. People were organizing, demanding the same changes implemented at Patterson. Bill Crawford called, his hostility replaced with resignation. "I suppose you want an apology for that damaged shipment. I want you to treat your workers better. Do that, and we're good." "Corporate's breathing down my neck. Says I can get on board or get out." "What's it going to be?" A long pause. "I've got 20 years in this company. Maybe it's time I remembered why I started." Back in his hotel room, Marcus called his mother. "How was Chicago, baby?" "I think we're winning, Mom. Slowly, but we're winning." "I'm proud of you. Your father would be too." Marcus smiled, thinking about flat tires and fate, about small actions creating waves of change. Tomorrow he'd return to the warehouse, to new challenges and old resistance. But tonight, he allowed himself to hope. The transformation he'd helped start was spreading, one facility at a time, one converted skeptic at a time, all because on a rainy night he'd chosen to stop and help. Change, he was learning, was contagious. You just had to be patient zero. The weeks following Chicago brought changes Marcus couldn't have imagined. The conference video went viral within the logistics industry, shared thousands of times on LinkedIn with headlines like "Warehouse Worker Challenges Corporate America" and "The Flat Tire That Changed an Industry." But with visibility came scrutiny, and with scrutiny came danger. Marcus was reviewing safety reports in his office when Angela Chen, the company's head of security, appeared at his door. She was a compact woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "We need to talk," she said, closing the door behind her. "You're being targeted." "The break-in, the background checks, I know. It's bigger than that." She placed a folder on his desk. "We intercepted communications between several regional managers and a competing logistics firm, Nexus Corp. They're actively trying to poach our contracts by painting the Patterson reforms as operational instability." Marcus flipped through the papers, emails, meeting notes, even surveillance photos of him entering and leaving work. "They're watching me. Not officially, but Nexus has connections in our middle management, people who don't appreciate how you've disrupted the status quo." Angela leaned forward. "There's more. We believe someone's been feeding them internal documents, trying to build a case that you're unqualified for your position." "Who?" "We're not sure yet. But Marcus, you need to be careful. This isn't just about warehouse politics anymore. This is corporate warfare." That evening, Marcus met Richard at a quiet restaurant downtown. The CEO looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than Marcus remembered. "Angela briefed me," Richard said, stirring his coffee absently. "I should have seen this coming. When you challenge the system fights back. Are you having second thoughts?" "About the changes?" Never. About dragging you into this mess? Every day. Richard met his eyes. You could have had a quiet life, Marcus. Finished your degree, worked your way up traditionally. Instead, you're in the crosshairs of people who play dirty for a living. I knew what I was getting into, Marcus said, though he wasn't sure that was entirely true. Did you? Because I'm not sure I did. Richard pulled out his phone, showing Marcus a message. Back off or we'll destroy everything you've built, starting with your pet project. That's about me. You're not just a warehouse supervisor anymore. You're a symbol of change, of accountability, of what happens when leadership actually listens to workers. Richard put his phone away. Some people find that very threatening. The threats escalated over the next week. Marcus arrived at work to find his car keyed, security cameras conveniently malfunctioning. A local news station received an anonymous tip about questionable hiring practices at Patterson, forcing Marcus to spend hours with corporate communications. But the workers rallied around him. Security volunteers appeared, off-duty employees who started escorting him to his car, watching the parking lot. Maria organized a support committee, collecting testimonials from workers about the improvements since Marcus took over. Then came the article. The Business Chronicle ran a piece titled "The Unqualified Savior: How Whitmore Industries Gambled on Inexperience." It painted Marcus as a well-meaning, but ultimately unprepared figurehead, suggesting the Patterson improvements were unsustainable publicity stunts. The writer had clearly been fed inside information, details about Marcus's first weeks, struggles with basic management software, early scheduling mistakes, things only someone in the warehouse would know. Marcus read it in his office, feeling each word like a punch. His phone buzzed with concerned texts from workers, from his mother, from Richard. But it was the email from the Chronicle's editor that caught his attention. We'd like to offer you space for a response. That night, instead of going home, Marcus walked through the warehouse. Second shift was in full swing, forklifts humming, workers moving with practiced efficiency. He stopped by the loading dock where Tommy Briggs was supervising a shipment. Read the article? Tommy asked, not looking up from his clipboard. Everyone has, apparently. You know what's funny? They got all the little stuff right. Yeah, you struggled with the software, messed up some schedules, but they missed the big stuff. Tommy finally looked at him. First week you were here, my kid had an asthma attack. Bad one. Under Jerry, I'd have gotten written up for leaving early. You drove us to the hospital yourself, remember? Marcus had almost forgotten. It seemed like a lifetime ago. That's not in their article, Tommy continued. Neither is how you stayed late teaching Maria's son math so he wouldn't fail summer school, or how you paid for Danny's physical therapy out of your own pocket before the new insurance kicked in. Other workers had gathered, drawn by the conversation. They want to talk about qualifications? Maria stepped forward. Fine. You're qualified because you give a damn. That's more than we've had in 20 years. Steve Mitchell, the forklift operator from the accident, spoke up. I got a job offer last week. Nexus Corp. 20% raise to jump ship, plus a signing bonus. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Steve. Told them to shove it. Steve grinned. We all did. They've been calling everyone, trying to poach talent, create chaos. Not one person's taken the bait. We're not stupid, another worker added. We know what they're trying to do. Break us up, make the changes fail, go back to the old way. Not happening. Marcus felt his throat tighten. I don't know what to say. Then write it down, Maria suggested. That response to the Chronicle? Tell them who you really are, not their version. He spent the weekend crafting his response, but not alone. Workers stopped by his apartment with coffee, suggestions, stories he'd forgotten. His mother cooked while he typed, occasionally offering wisdom disguised as casual observations. The final piece wasn't a defense, it was a manifesto. He wrote about the difference between traditional qualifications and actual leadership, about how systems designed to maintain the status quo often reject real change, about the workers who were the true heroes of Patterson's transformation. He named names, not to attack, but to illuminate. Bill Crawford's change of heart, Sandra Martinez's recent implementation of Patterson practices at her facility, the ripple effects spreading through the company and beyond. The Chronicle published it Monday morning. By noon, it had been shared more times than the original hit piece. Other workers started sharing their stories, not just from Whitmore Industries, but from warehouses across the country. Real qualifications began trending, but the opposition wasn't finished. Tuesday brought a lawsuit. 3 former Patterson employees, fired under Jerry's management, claiming wrongful termination and naming Marcus as a defendant for perpetuating discriminatory practices. "It's garbage," Victoria assured him during an emergency meeting. These employees were terminated for theft, documented and witnessed. But it's meant to distract you, drain resources. "And it's working," Marcus admitted. "I spent all morning with lawyers instead of running the warehouse." "That's the point," Richard said grimly. "They can't beat us on results, so they're trying to bog us down in legal battles." Wednesday's crisis, a coordinated sick-out at 3 other Whitmore facilities, all citing unsafe management practices. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. Thursday, an anonymous complaint to OSHA about supposed safety violations at Patterson, violations that mysteriously materialized overnight, fresh damage to equipment that had been fine the day before. By Friday, Marcus was exhausted. He sat in his office after everyone had left, staring at mounting paperwork. His phone buzzed with yet another text from a reporter seeking comment on the latest manufactured controversy. A soft knock interrupted his spiral. James, his uncle, stood in the doorway holding a toolbox. "Thought you might need help fixing something," James said with a knowing smile. "Unless you can fix corporate sabotage with a wrench, I'm not sure it'll help." James set the toolbox down and pulled up a chair. "Remember when the shop almost went under, back when you were in high school?" Marcus nodded. He remembered the late nights, his uncle's worried face, the bills piling up. "Had a competitor trying to push me out, spread rumors about my work, undercut prices, even had someone sugar my gas tank one night." James leaned back. "Know what saved me?" "What?" "Community. Every customer I'd treated right. Every employee I'd been fair to. Every supplier I'd built relationships with. They all rallied. Kept bringing their business, referred friends, some even helped catch the vandal." "This is bigger than that, Uncle James. These are corporations, lawsuits, media campaigns. Scales different, principles the same." James stood up. "You didn't just change some policies, nephew. You changed culture, and culture fights back when threatened." As if to prove his point, Marcus's phone lit up with a group text. Workers were organizing a weekend event. Community Day at the warehouse. Families invited, food trucks arranged, local media contacted. "We're taking control of the narrative," Maria's message read. "Let them see who we really are." Saturday morning, the Patterson warehouse parking lot transformed. Workers had decorated with balloons and banners. Children played games while spouses chatted. Local politicians showed up, drawn by the positive publicity. Richard arrived without his usual entourage, wearing jeans and a Patterson Logistics t-shirt. He manned a hamburger station, chatting with employees' families like any other volunteer. The media came too, not just business reporters, but community news, lifestyle bloggers, even a documentary crew. But this time the story wasn't controlled by anonymous sources or corporate rivals. It was told by the people living it. Marcus watched it all unfold, feeling something shift. The attacks wouldn't stop. He knew that. But maybe that wasn't the point. Maybe the point was building something strong enough to withstand them. As the sun set over the warehouse, casting long shadows across the celebrating crowd, Marcus's phone buzzed with a message from Angela Chen. Nexus CEO wants to meet, says he's interested in exploring similar workplace initiatives. Seems someone's strategy is backfiring. Marcus showed the message to Richard, who was covered in barbecue sauce and looking happier than Marcus had ever seen him. "Want to take the meeting?" Richard asked. Marcus looked around at the families, the workers, the community they'd built. Together? Always. The battle wasn't over. If anything, it was just beginning. But for the first time since that rainy night on the highway, Marcus felt ready for whatever came next. He'd started by changing a tire. Now he was changing an industry, and he wasn't doing it alone. The Nexus Corporation headquarters occupied a sleek black tower in the business district, all sharp angles and tinted glass. Marcus adjusted his tie as he and Richard crossed the marble lobby, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. Everything about the building screamed power and intimidation, a far cry from the Patterson warehouse. "Remember," Richard murmured as they approached the executive elevator, "Harrison Clark didn't build Nexus by playing nice. Whatever he wants, it's not altruism." Marcus nodded, though his palms were sweating. 6 months ago, he'd been unloading trucks. Now he was about to meet with one of the most ruthless CEOs in the logistics industry. The elevator opened directly into a penthouse conference room. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, making the people below look like ants. Harrison Clark stood at the windows, hands clasped behind his back. He was younger than Marcus expected, maybe early 50s, with silver temples and the build of someone who spent hours with a personal trainer. "Richard, so good to see you." Clark turned, his smile not reaching his eyes. His gaze shifted to Marcus. "And you must be the famous Marcus Thompson, the man who changed a tire and changed an industry." They shook hands, Clark's grip firm but not aggressive. "Please sit. Can I offer you anything? Water, coffee, perhaps some tea?" "We're fine," Richard said, taking a seat at the conference table. "You wanted to meet. We're here." Clark settled into his chair, studying them both. "Direct as always, Richard. Very well, I'll be equally direct. What you're doing at Whitmore Industries is causing ripples. Big ones." "Good," Richard replied. "Indeed. Your Patterson facility metrics are impressive. Productivity up, turnover down, worker satisfaction through the roof." Clark's fingers drummed on the table. "It's making some of our clients ask uncomfortable questions. Such as why they're not seeing similar results," Marcus suggested. Clark's smile widened slightly. "Exactly. Which puts me in an interesting position. I can either fight you, continue the campaign to discredit your initiatives, poach your workers, tie you up in legal battles, or, Richard prompted, "or I can join you." Clark leaned forward. "Implement similar programs at Nexus. Worker-focused management, living wages, proper equipment maintenance, the whole package." Marcus felt Richard tense beside him. This was unexpected. "You'll forgive my skepticism," Richard said slowly, "but you've spent the last 2 months trying to destroy everything we've built. Why the sudden change of heart?" "Because I'm a businessman, not an ideologue," Clark replied. "The numbers don't lie. Your approach is working. More importantly, several major clients have made it clear they prefer vendors who treat workers well. It's becoming a competitive advantage." "So this is purely about profit," Marcus said. "Everything in business is about profit, Mr. Thompson. The question is how we generate it." Clark stood, moving back to the windows. "I built Nexus by being ruthless, yes. By cutting costs, maximizing efficiency, treating labor as a commodity. It worked for 20 years. But times change." He turned back to them. "Your little revolution has shown that treating workers well isn't just morally right. It's economically sound. I can fight that truth, or I can adapt to it." "What exactly are you proposing?" Richard asked. "A partnership. Share best practices, coordinate implementation, present a united front to the industry, transform the entire sector together." Marcus and Richard exchanged glances. This was either a genuine opportunity or an elaborate trap. "We'd need guarantees," Richard said carefully. "Verifiable commitments, third-party oversight." "Of course. I wouldn't expect you to trust my word alone." Clark returned to his seat. "But there's something else, something I think Mr. Thompson should know." Marcus straightened. "What's that?" "The resistance you've been facing, the lawsuits, the sabotage, the media attacks. It wasn't all coming from us." Clark pulled out a folder. "Some of it was internal, from within Whitmore Industries itself." He slid the folder across the table. Inside were emails, financial records, phone transcripts. Marcus recognized some names immediately: regional managers, department heads, even a few board members. "They've been working to undermine you from day one," Clark continued. "Feeding us information, coordinating opposition, even redirecting funds meant for facility improvements into private accounts." Richard's face darkened as he read. "You're saying there's been embezzlement?" "Among other things. Your CFO, Margaret Walsh, she's been running a shadow operation preparing to launch a coup at the next board meeting. She has enough votes lined up to force you out, Richard, then dismantle everything you and Mr. Thompson have built." The room fell silent. Marcus remembered Walsh from the board meeting, her sharp questions, her concern about profit margins. But she'd seemed supportive in the end, even offered him a job after graduation. "Why tell us this?" Marcus asked. "Why help us?" Clark smiled genuinely for the first time. "Because if they succeed, they'll come after me next. Walsh and her allies don't want industry transformation. They want a return to the old ways. Maximum extraction, minimum investment. Bad for workers, bad for long-term business, bad for everyone except a few executives padding their golden parachutes." Richard was already on his phone, texting furiously. "Angela needs to see this immediately." "There's more," Clark said. "The anonymous complaint to OSHA, the forklift that almost killed your worker, those weren't random. Walsh has someone inside Patterson, someone close to you, Marcus." Marcus felt his stomach drop. Someone at Patterson was a traitor? Someone he trusted? "Who?" he demanded. "I don't know. The communications only reference our asset or the inside source, but they've been feeding information since your first week as supervisor." The next few hours blurred together. Emergency calls with Angela Chen, corporate security mobilizing, lawyers reviewing Clark's evidence. By evening, they were back at Whitmore headquarters, the building in crisis mode. Angela had commandeered a conference room, turning it into a war room. Screens displayed financial records, communication logs, employee files. Her team worked with quiet efficiency, mapping connections, tracking money flows. "It's worse than Clark indicated," she reported grimly. "Walsh has diverted almost $3 million over 2 years. Small amounts, carefully hidden. And she's not alone. We've identified at least 7 other executives involved." "And the inside source at Patterson?" Marcus asked. "Still unknown, but we've narrowed it down. Someone with access to your office, your schedule, internal communications." Angela pulled up a list of names. 12 possibilities. Marcus scanned the list, his heart sinking. Maria Gonzalez, Tommy Briggs, Steve Mitchell. People he'd trusted, worked beside, defended. One of them had been betraying him from the start. "We need to act fast," Angela continued. "Walsh is planning to call an emergency board meeting tomorrow night. If she gets control." "Everything falls apart," Richard finished. "The reforms, the partnerships, all of it. They worked through the night, preparing. Legal teams assembled evidence. Security prepared to secure facilities. Richard worked the phones, reaching out to loyal board members, major shareholders, anyone who might swing the vote. Marcus found himself alone in the break room at 3 a.m., staring at the vending machine without seeing it. His phone buzzed, a text from his mother. "You okay, baby? You sound stressed." He almost laughed. Stressed didn't begin to cover it. "Can't sleep?" Marcus turned to find Maria standing in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. His body tensed involuntarily. "Figured you might need this," she said, offering him a cup. He took it mechanically, watching her face for any sign of deception. Was it her, the person who'd helped him with scheduling, supported him through every crisis? "What's wrong, Marcus? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Just a lot on my mind," he managed. She nodded sympathetically. "The Nexus meeting? How did it go?" He hesitated. How much should he reveal? "Complicated. Things are changing fast." "They always do around you," she smiled. "Ever since that night with the tire." Something in her tone made him look at her more closely. Was there a hidden meaning? A threat? Or was paranoia eating at him? His phone buzzed again. "Angela, need you back in the war room now." "I have to go," he said abruptly. Maria's smile faltered. "Marcus, if something's wrong..." "Everything's fine," he lied, already moving toward the door. Back in the war room, Angela had news. "We found something. The inside source has been using a burner phone, but they made one mistake. They called it from their personal cell once. Just once." "Whose phone?" Marcus asked, dreading the answer. Angela looked at him sympathetically. "Jerry's." "Jerry? But he's been suspended for months." "Not Jerry himself," Angela clarified. "Someone who had access to his old office phone. Someone who's been in there regularly since you took over." Marcus's mind raced. Who had been using Jerry's old office? It had been converted to storage, but people were in and out all the time. Maintenance, cleaning crew, supervisors checking inventory. "There's more," Angela continued. "We trace the financial connections. Walsh has been funneling money through a shell company. Guess who's listed as a silent partner?" She pulled up a corporate document. There, buried in legal language, was a familiar name. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. "That's impossible." "I'm sorry, Marcus, but your Uncle James has been working with them all along." The uncle who'd encouraged him, supported him, told him stories about standing up to bullies. The uncle whose auto shop was supposedly struggling, who'd jumped at Richard's partnership offer. Had it all been a lie? "We need to move fast," Richard said, though his voice seemed distant. "The board meeting is in 18 hours. If we're going to stop this..." But Marcus barely heard him. His world was crumbling, trust shattering like glass. In trying to change the system, had he been a pawn in someone else's game all along? The war room buzzed with activity, plans forming, strategies developing. But Marcus stood frozen, coffee growing cold in his hand as everything he thought he knew unraveled around him. The fight for Whitmore Industries and everything they'd built was about to reach its climax, and Marcus would have to face it knowing that betrayal came not from strangers in suits but from family he'd trusted his entire life. Dawn was breaking over the city, painting the sky the color of flame. Appropriate, Marcus thought, for the day that would determine whether their revolution survived or burned to ash. The real battle was just beginning. The drive to his uncle's auto shop felt like the longest journey of Marcus's life. Dawn painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, but he barely noticed. His hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles went white, Angela's words echoing in his mind. "Your Uncle James has been working with them all along." The shop looked the same as always. Worn brick facade, faded sign, the familiar scent of motor oil wafting through the early morning air. James's truck was parked out front, and through the window, Marcus could see him working on an engine, just like any other day. Marcus killed the engine and sat for a moment, gathering courage. Then he stepped out, the morning chill biting through his shirt. The bell above the door chimed as he entered. "Marcus." James looked up with a smile that now seemed sinister. "You're here early. Thought you'd be preparing for that big board meeting." "We need to talk," Marcus said, his voice steadier than he felt. James set down his wrench, wiping his hands on a rag. "What's wrong, nephew? You look like someone died. Did you sell me out?" The words came out flat, emotionless. James's smile faltered. "What are you talking about?" "Walsh's shell company. Your name's on the partnership documents. You've been feeding them information, undermining everything we've built." Marcus stepped closer. "Tell me it's not true." For a long moment, James said nothing. Then his shoulders sagged and he suddenly looked 10 years older. "It's not what you think." "Then explain it to me, because right now, it looks like you've been playing me from the start." James moved to his office, gesturing for Marcus to follow. He pulled out a locked drawer, retrieving a manila folder thick with documents. 3 years ago, the shop was dying. Not just struggling, dying. I was 2 months from bankruptcy. "You never told me." "Pride." James cut him off. "Stupid pride. Walsh's people approached me, offered to invest, save the business. All I had to do was keep my ears open, report anything interesting about Whitmore Industries." "You were spying on the company?" "At first it was nothing. Industry gossip, public knowledge. Then you started working there and suddenly they wanted more. Details about operations, problems at the warehouse." James's hands shook as he flipped through the papers. "I tried to back out, but they had leverage, loans I couldn't repay, contracts that would ruin me." "So you sold out your own nephew?" "No." James's voice cracked. "I fed them nothing about you, made up excuses, gave them outdated information. But after you became supervisor, the pressure increased. They threatened to destroy not just my business, but me personally. Fraud charges, tax investigations they'd manufacture." Marcus felt his anger wavering, replaced by something more complex. "The night I changed Richard's tire, did you know who he was?" "God, no. That was pure coincidence. Or fate, maybe." James laughed bitterly. "When I realized what was happening, how you were changing things, I wanted to tell you, but I was terrified of losing you, of destroying what you were building. So instead, you let them use your office phone? Let them sabotage equipment that could have killed people?" "I didn't know about the equipment." James looked genuinely horrified. "The phone, yes, someone's been accessing it. But I never thought—" He stopped, realization dawning. "The cleaning crew. New company started 2 months ago. Walsh must have placed someone—" Marcus's phone buzzed. "Richard. Board meeting moved up. They're convening in 2 hours. Where are you?" 2 hours to save everything they'd built. Marcus looked at his uncle, the man who'd raised him after his father left, who'd taught him about engines and integrity and standing up to bullies. "Help me fix this," Marcus said quietly. "How?" "Testify. Tell the board everything. Expose Walsh's network." James paled. "They'll destroy me, the shop, everything. And if Walsh wins, she'll destroy everything anyway. Uncle James, you taught me that standing up to bullies means taking risks. This is your chance to make it right." James stared at the folder in his hands, then at his nephew. Slowly, he nodded. "Okay, let's go save your revolution." They rushed to Whitmore headquarters, James clutching his evidence folder like a lifeline. The building buzzed with tension, security everywhere, employees clustered in worried groups. The boardroom had been secured, but Walsh's faction had already arrived, looking confident. Richard met them in the hallway, his face grim. She's called in proxy votes, pulled every string. It's going to be close. We have something that might tip the scales, Marcus said, gesturing to James. In the war room, Angela's team quickly reviewed James's documents. Her eyes widened as she read. This is comprehensive. Financial transfers, communication logs, even recordings. Walsh built an entire shadow organization. Can we use it? Richard asked. It's admissible, but Walsh will claim it's fabricated, attack James's credibility. Angela looked at James. You'll need to testify in person. They'll tear you apart. I deserve it, James said quietly. Let them. The boardroom was packed. 12 board members sat around the mahogany table, with additional shareholders attending virtually. Walsh presided from the head of the table, immaculate in a gray suit radiating confidence. Thank you all for attending this emergency session, she began smoothly. As outlined in the briefing materials, serious concerns have emerged about the company's recent direction. Reckless spending, unqualified personnel in key positions, initiatives that prioritize sentiment over shareholder value. She clicked through slides showing carefully selected metrics, painting a picture of financial irresponsibility and operational chaos. Several board members nodded along. Therefore, I move for an immediate vote of no confidence in CEO Richard Whitmore and a reversal of the so-called Patterson initiatives. I second the motion, said Gerald Price, a veteran board member known for his conservative views. Discussion? Walsh asked, clearly expecting none. Richard stood. Actually, yes, quite a bit of discussion. He nodded to Marcus, who opened the boardroom doors. James entered, followed by Angela and her security team. Walsh's composure cracked for just a moment. What is this? She demanded. This is James Thompson, Richard announced. He has information relevant to this meeting, information about systematic fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy orchestrated by certain members of this board. The room erupted. Walsh banged her gavel. This is highly irregular. This man has no standing. Actually, interrupted Patricia Williams, one of the newer board members, I'd like to hear what he has to say. For the next hour, James laid out everything. The shell companies, the diverted funds, the network of middle managers working to undermine the reforms. Angela's team projected documents on the screen, bank records, emails, recorded conversations. Walsh fought back viciously. This man is a failed businessman with ties to our competitors. He's obviously been coerced. Then explain this, Angela interrupted, pulling up a bank statement. $3 million transferred from Whitmore accounts to your personal offshore holdings, or these emails planning the OSHA complaints, the equipment sabotage. The tide was turning. Board members who'd seemed aligned with Walsh began shifting uncomfortably. Virtual attendees typed furious questions in the chat. I call for a recess, Walsh said desperately. Denied, said Patricia Williams. I move for an immediate vote on the original motion. The vote was devastating, 10-2 against Walsh's motion with several abstentions. But they weren't done. I further move, Richard said, standing again, for the immediate termination of Margaret Walsh as CFO, pending criminal investigation. This vote was unanimous, even Walsh's allies abandoning her. As security escorted Walsh out, she stopped beside Marcus. You think you've won? This company will eat you alive, just like it does everyone else. Maybe, Marcus replied. But at least we're trying to change it. After the meeting, the war room felt oddly quiet. The crisis team dispersed, leaving Marcus, Richard, James, and Angela. What happens now? Marcus asked. Now we rebuild, Richard said. The rot went deeper than we knew. Walsh's network will take months to fully dismantle. But we've cut off the head. And the reforms? Stronger than ever. The board just saw what happens when we ignore our values. Richard smiled tiredly. Plus, Clark called during the meeting. Nexus is moving forward with their worker initiatives. The entire industry is shifting. Marcus turned to his uncle. What about you? James sighed. I'll face whatever consequences come. The shop will be fine, Richard interrupted. We're honoring our partnership agreement. If anything, your testimony today proved your integrity when it mattered most. After the others left, Marcus and James sat alone in the conference room watching the sun set over the city. I'm sorry, James said finally, for everything. I know. Marcus was quiet for a moment. You know what I keep thinking about that night on the highway? If I'd driven past Richard, none of this would have happened. The good or the bad. Regrets? No. Just amazed at how one moment can change everything. Marcus looked at his uncle. You taught me to help people, to stand up for what's right. Even when you were struggling, those lessons stuck. And you taught me something today, James replied, that it's never too late to live up to your own principles. They sat in comfortable silence, uncle and nephew, watching the city lights flicker on one by one. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, rebuilding trust, implementing reforms across the company, dealing with the legal fallout of Walsh's schemes. But tonight Marcus allowed himself to feel something he hadn't in weeks: hope. The revolution he'd accidentally started wasn't just surviving, it was growing, spreading, changing an entire industry. All because he'd stopped to help a stranger change a tire. Sometimes the biggest transformations really did begin with the smallest acts of kindness. And sometimes, Marcus thought, looking at his uncle, redemption came from the most unexpected places. The future stretched ahead, uncertain but bright with possibility. And Marcus Thompson, former warehouse worker, accidental revolutionary, was ready to meet it head-on. 6 months after the boardroom showdown, Marcus stood before a crowd of over 2,000 at the National Business Ethics Summit in Atlanta. The boy who'd once struggled with public speaking in high school now commanded the stage with quiet confidence, his story having become something of a legend in corporate circles. The question I get asked most often, he said, adjusting his microphone, is whether I regret stopping that night, whether knowing all the challenges that followed, the threats, the betrayal, the sleepless nights, I would do it again. He paused, scanning the audience. My answer is always the same. I'd stop even sooner. Laughter rippled through the crowd. In the front row, Richard Whitmore smiled, sitting next to Harrison Clark from Nexus Corp. Their unlikely alliance had shocked the industry, but the results were undeniable. Together, they'd created the Fair Labor Initiative, a certification program for companies committed to worker-centered practices. Change is never easy, Marcus continued. When you challenge systems designed to extract maximum value for minimum investment, those systems fight back. But here's what I've learned. People are hungry for something better. Workers, managers, even CEOs. Most people want to do right. They just need permission to try. After his speech, Marcus was surrounded by executives, activists, and journalists. A young woman from a textile company in North Carolina grabbed his arm. We're trying to implement similar changes, but our board is resistant. Any advice? Start with data, Marcus said. Show them Patterson's numbers. Productivity up 40%, turnover down 60%, profit margins actually improved despite higher wages. Make the business case first, then the moral one. Richard appeared at his elbow as the crowd thinned. Cars waiting. You don't want to miss your flight. Right. Can't be late for my first day of classes. The drive to the airport gave them time to talk. Marcus was finally starting his business degree, not part-time as originally planned, but through an accelerated executive program at Stanford, fully funded by Whitmore Industries. Nervous? Richard asked. Terrified, Marcus admitted. I'll be the only one there without a traditional corporate background. Good. That's exactly why they accepted you. Your real-world experience is worth more than a dozen MBAs. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from his mother. So proud of you, baby. Dad would be too. His relationship with his parents had grown stronger through everything. His mother had become something of a local celebrity, known as the woman who raised the tire change kid. She'd started volunteering at the community center, teaching financial literacy classes to young adults. At the airport, Richard handed him an envelope. Open it on the plane. What is it? Call it a graduation present, early. They shook hands, then embraced. 6 months ago, such familiarity would have been unthinkable. Now Richard was more than a boss. He was a mentor, almost a father figure. On the plane, Marcus opened the envelope. Inside was a deed transfer for his uncle's auto shop, now officially owned by Marcus Thompson, with a note. Every revolution needs a home base. Make it something special. R. He called his uncle immediately. Did you know about this? James chuckled. Richard and I have been plotting. The shop's going to be the flagship for a new program. Vocational training combined with business education. Mechanics who learn management, managers who understand mechanics. Uncle James, I don't know what to say. Then don't say anything, just make it work, like you always do. The flight to California gave Marcus time to reflect. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind. After Walsh's removal, the cleanup had been massive. 17 executives fired, 3 arrested, millions in misappropriated funds recovered. But from the chaos emerged something beautiful, a company reborn. Patterson Logistics had become the model facility. Delegations from other companies toured weekly, studying everything from the ergonomic workstations to the profit-sharing program. The warehouse workers had formed committees taking ownership of improvements. Maria Gonzalez now headed the Worker Innovation Council, which had generated dozens of efficiency improvements. Tommy Briggs had been promoted to shift supervisor, his first act being the creation of a child care cooperative for night shift workers. Steve Mitchell led safety training, his near miss with the faulty forklift becoming a teaching tool for proper equipment maintenance. The ripple effects extended far beyond Whitmore Industries. 3 competitors had launched similar initiatives. A major retail chain announced it would preferentially contract with certified fair labor companies. Business schools added case studies about the Patterson transformation to their curricula, but it hadn't all been smooth. Some facilities resisted change. 2 union drives had emerged, which Richard surprised everyone by supporting, saying workers should have every tool available to advocate for themselves. A few clients had left, calling the reforms socialist. But for everyone lost, 2 more appeared, attracted by the positive publicity and improved service metrics. Marcus landed in Palo Alto as the sun was setting. A driver waited with a sign, Thompson, Stanford Executive Program. The campus was intimidating. Manicured lawns, historic buildings, students who looked like they'd been preparing for this their whole lives. His apartment was modest but comfortable, paid for by his scholarship. As he unpacked, his phone rang. Victoria Chambers, now president of operations after proving instrumental in the post-Walsh reforms. Settling in? She asked. Trying to. Still feels surreal. You've earned it. Listen, I wanted to give you a heads up. The documentary crew starts filming next week. Netflix had commissioned a documentary about the transformation, tentatively titled The Kindness Revolution. Marcus had reluctantly agreed to participate, understanding the story was bigger than him now. Also, Victoria continued, Clark called. Nexus is launching their training program. He wants you to keynote their management conference when you're on break. Tell him yes. If we're changing the industry, we do it together. That night, unable to sleep, Marcus walked the campus. He found himself at the business school library, staring at books by legendary CEOs and management theorists. Tomorrow, he'd be sitting in classes with their disciples, people who'd studied these theories for years. His phone buzzed with a group text from the Patterson crew, photos from the warehouse, a birthday celebration for one of the cleaning staff, everyone chipping in for the party. In the background, he could see the suggestion board, now covered with ideas and responses. The break room had new furniture, people were smiling. Another text, this one from a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Thompson, you don't know me, but I heard you speak today. I'm a warehouse worker in Detroit. Your story gave me hope. Thank you." Messages like these came daily now, workers from across the country sharing their struggles, asking for advice, reporting small victories. Marcus tried to respond to as many as possible, remembering how it felt to be invisible in the system. The next morning, his first class was organizational leadership. The professor, Dr. Sarah Chen, had specifically requested Marcus for her section. "Class, we have someone special joining us," she announced. "Marcus Thompson, whose real-world experience redefines what we thought we knew about change management." 30 faces turned to him, some curious, some skeptical, a few openly admiring. Marcus felt the familiar flutter of imposter syndrome, then pushed it down. He belonged here, not because he was special, but because he represented something important, the voice of workers in rooms where decisions were made. "Mr. Thompson," Dr. Chen continued, "perhaps you could start us off. What's the most important lesson you've learned about leadership?" Marcus thought about Jerry's corruption, Walsh's betrayal, but also about Richard's humility, his uncle's redemption, the workers who'd rallied around change. "That leadership isn't about being the smartest person in the room," he said finally. "It's about recognizing that the smartest solutions often come from the people closest to the problems. My job wasn't to have all the answers, it was to create space for others to share theirs." Nods around the room. Dr. Chen smiled. "And that, class, is why traditional MBA programs are inviting practitioners like Mr. Thompson. Theory meets practice." The day flew by. Economics, strategy, financial analysis. Marcus's head spun with concepts and frameworks, but he found himself contributing unique perspectives. When they discussed supply chain optimization, he talked about the human cost of efficiency. When they analyzed labor costs, he reminded them those numbers represented families. That evening, study groups formed. Marcus found himself surrounded by classmates eager to hear more about Patterson, about real-world applications of classroom theories. A woman from Tesla, a man from a healthcare startup, a former Army officer transitioning to corporate life, all united by a desire to lead differently. His phone rang as the group was dispersing. Richard checking in. "How was day one?" "Overwhelming, inspiring, exhausting." "Sounds about right. Listen, I have news. The board approved the expansion. We're rolling out Patterson practices company-wide. Full implementation within 18 months. Marcus sank onto a bench outside the library. That's huge. It's what you started. Also, I'm stepping down as CEO in 2 years. The board agrees we need fresh leadership for this new direction. Richard, no, it's time. I'll stay on as chairman, guide the transition. But Marcus, we want you to consider coming back. Not now. Finish your degree, get more experience. But eventually, the board is unanimous. You represent our future. After the call, Marcus sat in the California twilight, processing everything. 2 years ago, he'd been worried about making rent. Now he was being groomed to potentially lead a billion-dollar company. The weight of it should have been crushing. Instead, it felt like purpose. His phone lit up with another text from the Patterson crew, this time a video. The warehouse staff had gathered to record a message. "Good luck at Stanford, boss. Make us proud. P.S. Don't forget us when you're running the world." Marcus smiled, wiping his eyes. Forget them? They were the reason he was here. Every late night studying would be for them. Every connection he made, every strategy he learned, would be tools to create more workplaces where people mattered. As he walked back to his apartment, Marcus thought about circles, how one act of kindness had circled back to transform not just his life, but an entire industry. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new lessons, new opportunities to expand the circle. The security guard at his building nodded as he passed. "Evening, Mr. Thompson. Studying late?" "Just getting started," Marcus replied, and meant it in every possible way. In his apartment, he set up his desk, unpacked his books, and prepared for the journey ahead. On his laptop, a message blinked from Harrison Clark. "Heard you killed it at the summit. Nexus board is fully committed now. Let's change the world, kid." Marcus smiled, opened his economics textbook, and began to study. Outside, the California night was full of stars, each one a reminder that even the smallest lights could illuminate the darkness if you just had the courage to shine. 2 years later, Marcus Thompson stood in the executive conference room of Whitmore Industries, looking out at a skyline he'd once only seen from ground level. The brass nameplate on the door read Chief Operating Officer, but the title still felt surreal. His Stanford MBA hung on the wall alongside a framed photo from the original Patterson warehouse crew. "Nervous?" Richard asked, entering with 2 cups of coffee. "Always," Marcus admitted, accepting the cup. "The nerves keep me honest." Today was significant, the official launch of the Whitmore Foundation's Worker Education Initiative, a program that would provide full scholarships to frontline employees across the industry. But for Marcus, it was more than that. It was a promise fulfilled. The boardroom filled with familiar faces, Victoria Chambers, now CEO, having taken over when Richard moved to chairman, Maria Gonzalez, flown in from Dallas where she ran the Southwest region, Tommy Briggs, VP of Safety and Compliance, Steve Mitchell, heading the newly created Worker Relations Department. The kids from the warehouse had grown into industry leaders. Even Harrison Clark was there, representing the Coalition for Ethical Logistics, an industry group born from his partnership with Richard. Nexus and Whitmore, once bitter rivals, now led a movement that had transformed how America thought about labor. "Before we begin," Victoria said, "Marcus has an announcement." Marcus stood, his heart full. 3 years ago, I changed a tire in the rain. That moment led to all of this. Careers transformed, lives improved, an entire industry reimagined. Today we're launching a program that will help 10,000 workers get the education they need to advance. But there's something else. He pulled out a folder. "Richard, you gave me my shot. Let me return the favor." He slid the folder across. "James Thompson, my uncle, has developed a revolutionary apprenticeship model. Mechanics who learn business students who understand operations. We're piloting it at 50 locations." Richard opened the folder, his eyes widening. "This is brilliant. It's what you taught me. The best solutions come from people closest to the problems." James lived both sides. His mistakes, his redemption, his experience, it all led to this. The meeting proceeded with presentations, votes, and plans. But Marcus's mind drifted to all the moments that had led here. The late nights studying at Stanford, earning respect from classmates who initially saw him as a diversity admission. The internship at Google, where he'd implemented worker-centered practices in their fulfillment centers. The consulting work with Fortune 500 companies, teaching CEOs what he'd learned on the warehouse floor. After the meeting, Marcus walked through headquarters, stopping at the Employee Innovation Center, a space where frontline workers could prototype improvements, test ideas, and present directly to leadership. 3 years ago, this floor had been executive offices. Now it buzzed with creativity from every level of the company. His phone rang. His mother. "How did it go, baby?" "Good, Mom. Really good. The foundation's fully funded." I'm so proud. Oh, and guess what? The community center wants to expand our financial literacy program. They're calling it the Thompson Method. Marcus smiled. His mother had become an advocate in her own right, teaching money management to underserved communities. The ripple effects of that rainy night seemed endless. That evening, Marcus drove to Patterson Logistics, not in his new Tesla, but in the old Honda Civic he'd kept as a reminder. The warehouse had changed dramatically. Solar panels covered the roof. The employee parking lot was full of newer cars. A child care center occupied the renovated administration building. Inside, the night shift was starting. Some faces were familiar, many were new, but the atmosphere was completely different from his first day 3 years ago. People chatted easily, equipment hummed properly, and the break room, now more of a cafe, bustled with life. "Mr. Thompson," a young woman approached, stars in her eyes. "I'm Sarah Chen. I just got accepted to state through the education program. Thank you for making this possible." "Thank you for taking the opportunity," Marcus replied. "What are you studying?" "Industrial psychology. I want to help design better workplaces. We need people like you. Keep in touch." He found his old supervisor station, now occupied by Miguel Rodriguez, who'd started as a forklift operator 6 months ago. "How's the job treating you, Miguel?" "Amazing, sir. Never thought someone like me could move up so fast." "Someone like you?" "You know, no degree, immigrant family, thick accent." Marcus smiled. "I know exactly what you mean. And please, call me Marcus." Later, he stood in the parking lot where it all began, the exact spot where he'd first seen Richard's Mercedes hazard lights blinking in the rain. A car pulled up, Richard's new electric sedan. "Thought I'd find you here," Richard said, joining him. "Nostalgic?" "Always. Sometimes I come here just to remember." "Remember what?" "How it felt to be invisible, to work yourself to exhaustion and know nobody upstairs cared. I never want to forget that feeling." Richard nodded. "It's why you're good at this. You remember." He paused. "The board meeting is next week. They're voting on the succession plan." "I know. You ready to be CEO?" Marcus took a deep breath. "Honestly, I'm terrified, but that's probably good." "It is. The moment you stop being scared is the moment you stop caring." Richard smiled. "You know, I've been thinking about that night too. If you hadn't stopped, someone else would have. Maybe. But they might not have had your perspective, your integrity, your ability to see what needed changing." Richard clapped his shoulder. "The universe put us on that highway for a reason." A week later, Marcus stood before the board as they voted unanimously to name him CEO-elect, to take office in 6 months when Victoria moved to the International Division. The press release went viral. From warehouse to C-suite, the tire change that changed everything. But the real work was just beginning. Marcus spent the transition months on the road, visiting facilities, talking to workers, implementing the lessons he'd learned. Everywhere he went, the story was the same. Transformation was possible when you put people first. The official transition ceremony was held at the original Patterson warehouse. Workers past and present filled the space. Richard spoke about legacy, Victoria about vision. But when Marcus took the microphone, he kept it simple. 3 years ago, I worked right here, loading trucks, scanning packages, counting minutes until shift end. I see some familiar faces, people who remember those days. What's changed isn't just policies or paychecks, it's possibility, the idea that every person here matters, that every voice deserves to be heard. He paused, emotion thick in his throat. I didn't start this revolution. I just changed a tire. But that moment taught me something profound. Kindness creates ripples. Small actions can trigger massive change. Every person here has that power. You just have to be willing to stop and help. The applause was thunderous. As Marcus stepped down, workers lined up to shake his hand, share stories, offer ideas. The security guard from night shift, the single mom from packaging, the immigrant from maintenance, each had a vision for making things better. Later, as the warehouse emptied, Marcus found himself alone where it all began. The night shift was starting, familiar rhythms of work and purpose. His phone buzzed with messages. Congratulations from industry leaders, interview requests from media, strategic questions from his executive team. But one message stood out, an unknown number. Mr. Thompson, my car just broke down on I-95. It's raining, and I'm scared. The tow company says 2 hours. Any advice? Marcus smiled, grabbed his keys, and headed for his car. Some habits died hard. 30 minutes later, he pulled up behind a stranded Volkswagen, hazard lights blinking in the rain. A young woman stood beside it, phone pressed to her ear, looking lost and afraid. Need some help? Marcus called out, raising his voice above the storm. Her relief was palpable. Oh, thank God, I don't suppose you know anything about cars. I might know a thing or two, he said, already reaching for his tools. As he knelt beside her flat tire, the woman chatted nervously. I'm actually heading to a job interview, night shift at a warehouse. First real job since college. Which warehouse? Patterson Logistics. I hear they treat people well there. Marcus smiled, rain dripping down his face. I've heard that too. 20 minutes later, tire changed. The woman tried to pay him. Please, let me give you something. You saved my interview. Just pass it on, Marcus said. Help someone else when you can. As she drove away, Marcus stood in the rain, thinking about circles and ripples, about kindness and change. Tomorrow, he'd be CEO of a billion-dollar company. Tonight, he was just a guy who stopped to help. His phone rang. Richard. Where are you? The executive team's waiting for our strategy dinner. Changing a tire, Marcus said. Richard laughed. Of course you are. Some things never change. Some things shouldn't. Driving back to the city, windshield wipers fighting the rain, Marcus thought about the journey. From warehouse worker to CEO, from invisible to influential, from surviving to thriving. But at the core, he was still the same person. Someone who believed in stopping to help. The headquarters building loomed ahead, lit windows reaching toward the sky. Somewhere up there, his future waited, challenges and opportunities, decisions that would affect thousands of lives. But he faced it without fear, grounded in a simple truth. The biggest transformations really did begin with the smallest acts of kindness. As he parked in the executive lot, Marcus touched the worn employee badge still hanging from his rearview mirror, a reminder of where he started and why he continued. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new chances to create ripples of change. But tonight had reminded him of the most important lesson. No matter how high you climb, never forget to stop and help someone else up. The security guard nodded as he entered the building. Evening, Mr. Thompson. Working late again? Always, Marcus smiled. But it's good work. And it was. The kind of work that changed lives, one tire at a time.